I wanted to create this presentation for you to kind of walk you through a little bit of my journey since COVID. Like many, I found myself out of work with the onset of the pandemic, applied to hundreds, if not thousands, of jobs trying to get restarted in my career. And then kind of thought of the old saying that the definition of insanity is continuing to do the same thing and expecting a different result. So I started taking a different path. And what I'm going to share is sort of the way I went about rethinking a jumpstart in my career by using some of these skill and aptitude tests. Mm, In all fairness and full transparency, I had exposure to some of these tests many, many years ago in the workplace and did not like the experience at all. Found that it was very easy for toxic or ineffective leaders to use these ineffectively and weaponize them against employees. But I'm reapproaching them from my own perspective, really doing this for myself, and to better understand really what I'm about. So I'm going after, things deliberately, and with a different intention. And so I think that maybe that if that's helpful for you to kind of think about, well, I'm in the same place, or I've been trying some different things, but maybe I want to get serious about what do I go back to school for? What do I focus on next? Maybe you're not really looking to change what you're doing per se, but maybe you want to get uh, a bit higher position in your organization and need to maximize your strengths. Or maybe you just want to find out how you can be a better partner in a relationship, by coming, to the front of that relationship with who you are and what you really value. So hopefully this just gives you some ideas of what's out there, and what can benefit you. The first one I wanted to just talk about is called the Values in Action Survey, or the VIA. This particular site, Values in Action, they have a ton of different surveys out there. In full transparency, full disclosure, some of them are quite expensive. The one that I'm recommending to you is a 38 question free survey. They will not charge you at all. You don't have to put any credit card information in the site. You just sign up and then they send you the full report through your email. That's the only reason why they capture your email. You'll never get spam or anything like that from them. What I thought was really valuable about this VIA survey is that it really got down to specific behaviors and actions, and um, it highlighted in some respects what I already knew, but it reinforced that that's a strength for me. And so I'll give you an idea in a second of how my results came back and what you can expect to receive if you were to take one of these surveys. But essentially, this really taps into how we think, feel, and behave. In contrast, say, to Myers Briggs, which I'll show you in a little bit, which I think is really just about, introversion, extroversion, and some of those characteristics. So this is my a snapshot of my results from the VIA. There's three, when I read this, there was three things that really stood out to me. This whole idea, and this was again reading the whole report that they sent, but honesty, fairness, and judgment. And so it's interesting, there's a theme here, right? Of like wanting fairness for others, wanting, the right decisions to be made, wanting people to act in a way that's really genuine and sincere. And so it's funny because at the beginning of this, I was saying that for me, I was stuck in this endless loop of trying to go back to what I was doing pre-pandemic. And I think what this underscored for me was I've always had this desire to really focus on employment law, employer rights, employee rights, I should say, worker safety, and those kind of themes. And so this has been sort of the catapult to move me further in that direction, that those principles of judgment, fairness, is really the core principles in advocating for the worker. So, kind of interesting, how going back to this and just looking at it and really thinking about it um, resonated in a different way. So Gallup, a Gallup must, I know the Gallup from all the surveys that they've done, public surveys for years and years. They must have at some point in the not so distant future acquired Clifton Strengths. Clifton Strengths is another tool that, excuse me, has been around for a long time. They had a great book. It had a CD and a workbook to go with. So it looks like these two groups have joined forces. I've taken this tool as well, this Clifton Strengths Finder, years ago in an organization. They happened to offer it and to everyone, and it was available. So I took it. That's how I'm acquainted with this. So the way they organize their information into these three categories: strategy, executing, which I kind of think those two categories are somewhat related. And then you've got more um, relationship and people oriented, and the two other boxes of relationship building and influencing. And so you're either really heavy on your strategy and your ability to achieve results, or you can be really heavy in how you're able to form relationships. And so what's funny about this one, or what's interesting, I should say, about this one is when I took it, I came out really heavy on strategy and executing. And at the time, I worked as a solo consultant with organizations, and I was really in that mode of needing to achieve results, really getting in there, being very strategic, making sure that I was very disciplined and so forth. What I didn't necessarily have because of my solitary role was a lot of relationship building. And what I've tried to do as a result of getting my results and realizing I only had one score in one of the relationship boxes is I'm really focusing on how do I build better work relationships, and make sure that I come out of my box, so to speak, and being so solitary and reaching across the aisle and being more collaborative and including people, and stop being such a one-man band all the time. So as I mentioned, you get your results come out in four categories: strategic thinking, relationship, executing, and the way Clifton Strength Finder organizes your information. And I'm sorry I don't have the report that I had on hand, but you get a graph of which of those um, four boxes was most prevalent, and then what's your highest achieving score versus your lowest achieving score. I find that also with the Clifton Strength, when it's offered in organizations, it's usually with wraparound consulting services. Rarely do you individuals kind of go off and take this test on your own, unless you want to go back to the book and use the book for it. Um, but for the most part now, it's a whole package deal. Um, then I found this site called brainmanager.io. That's how you search for it, brainmanager.io. Another site with, chock-a-block full of all kinds of tests. There are two free tests, and I shouldn't say mostly, I'm only focusing on things that are free in this presentation. If you want to spend a couple dollars looking at some of these other tests, please feel free to do that. I just, in being sensitive to people's dollar, I just wanted to give you some free ideas. On the Brain Manager site, though, they had two free tests. One was a career test and one was a time management test. I thought the time management test was really interesting. And I thought I was a very good time manager, but after taking that test, it certainly opened my eyes to where I can improve. Then the other test they have is a career test. And I'm forwarding here because this is the way they output the information: realistic, investigative, artistic, social, etc. These are known as the Holland codes. So, not sure if you've ever been exposed to the Holland codes, and I'll show you what they look like in a little bit. But the Holland codes are a way of classifying job categories by these categories of realistic, investigative, and so forth. Um, and so when you take the test, you're going to either wind up as your top category of realistic or your top as investigative or artistic and so on and so forth. That doesn't mean that you don't have qualities in the other categories. They'll just present you with your most dominant trait, um, and so forth. An oldie but a goodie is What Color is Your Parachute? This book has been around, I think, if not the 60s, it definitely came out in the 70s. It was one of, at least that I know of, one of the first career focused books, and really looking at what suits you, and how to choose a career that's ideal for you. It's still very much in style today. They still have a book, they have worksheets, they have a website. You can go out to their website and find all kinds of great tips and advice, some worksheets that you can use. Some of what they offer is paid, but most of it that you can find online is free. So I mentioned these Holland codes, and the Holland codes have been around for a long time, as a way of looking at various career categories and looking at it from the perspective of the aptitudes. What do you have an aptitude to do? And you know what? I mentioned that I would link, I would share that Holland code. I have a PDF, and I will just upload it uh, in the description of this video, so you can just get your hands on that and download it. Um, but here's some ideas of, again, what what do the Holland codes represent? People who, realistic people work with things, artistic people work with ideas, social people work with people. So, think about a social person. This is going to be a case manager, a social worker, people in very high people facing roles. Um, People who are enterprising, they need to be able to persuade someone about an idea. So they need to be, people facing, working with people, but they also need evidence. They need data to support what they want to do. Realistic people, these are where you don't have a lot of flexibility, maybe in a lot of input into how the job gets done. There's a way to do it, and there's a way to do it correctly, and that's just really all there is to it. I think of, like, the first thing that comes to mind with realistic is an air traffic controller. There's no, group think about how we should do this, in the right way. You just either are an air traffic controller or you're not. um, and then investigative, I think of people who need to do research, people who like to, organize information, even consultants, and are investigative. So as I mentioned, kind of similar to Brain Manager, but the Holland Codes, there is a Holland Codes website that you can go out to and look at their tools out there. Um, so another one I just want to mention is the ONET, O asterisk net interest profiler. So for people who might be outside of the United States, this is featured on the U.S. Department of Labor website. It's a free tool again. What's nice about this particular tool is that you don't need an email or anything to sign up. It doesn't collect any data from you. You just go ahead and use the tool. Um, without, I know sometimes people are very concerned about putting their email and things, and then you get a million emails from them. It's like, ugh, yeah, no. Um, so these are the questions, though, that the ONET offers. And what I thought was kind of, I won't say poor about the site, but very different from some of the other um, assessment sites, or that there's no questions here about behaviors. These are very straightforward, literal questions about things you might like to do. Would you like to sing in a band? Sure, I'd like to sing in a band. I can't carry a tune, but sure, I'd like to sing in a band. Would you like to put out forest fires? Well, fire scares me. I mean, the questions to me feels too literal to really get to. I think what the value of the tool is to get to the underlying thought process and behavior behind why you do a job. That's really the meat of it. Asking whether what you would like to do, and I don't know. But what's interesting is the ONET interest profiler organizes the information into the Holland codes again. And so interestingly, these are my results. I took it real quick, and this is what it popped up um, as my particular scores. The one thing, though, that is really interesting about this, and for whatever reason, I seem to have gotten more artistic results than any other category. I'm not really sure about that, but what's interesting here is that they organize the information into how do you want to go about getting a job? Do you want little preparation yet you want to just jump into? Do you want something with medium preparation or extensive? I thought this was really great if you're already out in the workforce and let's say you want to change careers, you can't go back to school right now, you've got too many other things on your plate. Okay, what kind of job could I get that involves really little or no preparation? Um, and you could even take, if you wanted to do this, because you can get to this screen without um, having to take the whole test, you could take another test, get your Holland Codes profile, and then jump to this section and look at the job categories in terms of preparation. But I just thought this is neat of like, I can't go back to school, or I'm only willing to do a certificate program to get into my next job, or you know what, I'm ready to just throw it all away, start over again with a completely new college degree and do something different. And being able to think through things that way. And then finally, we've got Myers Briggs. I don't really think about Myers Briggs so much as a career assessment tool. I just felt like it probably belonged here. And the reason I don't think of Myers Briggs in that way is, a great example is I come up as an INTJ, but I spent most of my career, 30 some years, working as a nurse and then a consultant. And people would assume if you're a nurse or you're a doctor or something in healthcare that you're automatically an extrovert because you have to interact with people all the time. But I'm not. And I know many healthcare workers who are not extroverts. Extroversion and introversion is really about where you get your fuel. But as I mentioned, sometimes people administer these tools in the workplace and they make blanket assumptions about, oh, well, you should be doing this or that job or the other based on the information that they get and not really looking at it holistically, and really thinking about the person and what they're good at. I just think it's dangerous to use sort of a blanket assumption of the Myers-Briggs test. And so the last one I just want to mention is called Truity. It's truity.com. Again, another site with tons of information out there. Beyond career tests, they also have a lot of personal tests. If you want to take something relationship based, as I mentioned, you can use some of these to determine where your strengths are in a relationship, either your family or a romantic relationship or friendships, or whatever. So this one really gets down to, again, the the behavioral questions, which I think are very valuable. The key, of course, to answering any of these any of these tests like this is to go with your first instinct and not be tempted to linger over these questions and answer based off of what you think is societally correct or appropriate, and just try to go, just get through it as quickly as possible. So they deliver the information a little differently than some of the other surveys that um, give you the Holland codes back. This groups it into four categories, and you get this kind of skewed pie chart here. And this was my information that you're looking at, just my aggregated information, where the bulk of my answers wound up coming in the humanitarian. And I think this is, again, kind of interesting. I work as, I've spent a lot of my career working as a consultant, as a nurse. And to me, this is a pretty good, assessment of, um, where I am. And then the next piece being innovator, using analytical skills to solve problems. Yeah, I mean been my career. I think about the value of, if you are still in college and trying to figure out your major, or switching majors, or even haven't started college, how valuable this information could be. I think if I went back, to when I graduated, I might have chosen differently, um, even though many things seem to be aligning with where I'm at. So that's it. That's kind of what I wanted to share. Give you some ideas of, maybe you want to poke out there and look at some of these different tools and think about how you can integrate them into your life without feeling like, oh, my supervisor's administering this to us because he wants to put us all in a bucket. This is your assessment of yourself. Well, thanks for listening. I'll try to get better at posting videos on this site. I know I've been kind of lax. But thanks for listening, and take care.